This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I wanna talk to you. Friends talking nerdy.
This is the podcast making, public transit taking, kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing, son of a gun, Tim the Nerd, welcoming you to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy, part of the Deluxe Edition Network. Head to deluxeeditionnetwork.com to find out about all of the lovely shows on the den. And seated next to me, we have the most electrifying professor in podcasting today, Professor Aubrey. How you doing?
Yo, I'm good.
Oh, good to hear that. Now, I've had some awesome times on drugs over the years.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah, by your response, I assume you've never had any sort of positive interactions with drugs of any
Of
kind?
course not.
Okay, of course not, yeah. Too stuffy, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, she drinks her tea with the pinky out.
Yeah.
But, like anybody that has...
I've known lots of people who've done a lot of drugs.
As an adult human being in modern society, we have access to a lot of chemicals that can affect our moods, either as an upper, as a downer, or somewhere in between. And I don't think that there is anything necessarily inherently wrong with that. However, I think it is important to understand that with any type of substance that you use for personal enjoyment like that there are going to be some side effects that could occur. And I think it's important to assess yourself and be honest with yourself over something like that in order to make sure that if the time comes to where you need to get off of a particular substance of some sort, and I'm being vague there because, I talk like this and some people may assume I'm only talking about illegal substances. I'm not, because caffeine, people, is a legal substance that a lot of people that, don't smoke or don't drink alcohol or anything like that are definitely addicted to. And it has its positive aspects, of course. It also has its very negative aspects.
Absolutely. I mean, I think everything has positive aspects and negative aspects. Like, we live in a world of ambivalence where two things can be the same, can be true at the same time.
And when it comes to having a substance of any sort essentially take over your lives, like there's a lot of times shame that's kind of ingrained in a person that makes them not want to talk about it or to get help for it. People end up thinking, I can handle this myself. And it's great if people can do that, but sometimes you need some help, right?
Yeah.
So what we wanted to do this week is go to the resource that we go to on a regular basis, our good friends at Psychology Today, and talk about the article, Practical Advice on How to Quit Cannabis.
Hey, I didn't know that it was difficult at all to quit cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those deals that I know that I can quit anytime, I just don't want to. I mean, that is the thing I think to think about, and I'm glad we found this particular article here too, because, throughout the years, in terms of the pro-marijuana argument you hear, a lot of times it's the argument is simply that marijuana is not the same as LSD or heroin, what is currently regulated as by the United States government. And while that is definitely true, I think a lot of people that do make that argument tend to not talk about the bad stuff that can happen with marijuana, and it's important to bring that up. Not everybody has the physical ability to handle it like Willie Nelson or Snoop Dogg.
Sure.
So we wanted to do here is go through the bullet points on this article and talk about it. Mainly because, again, talking about stuff like this makes it to where that, inner shame that a person might feel if they do come to the realization that, something as innocent, and I will say as innocent compared to like an addiction to crystal meth, like a marijuana addiction is not the same as being on something that intense, but you still want to be able to feel that openness to be able to talk about it with other people. And hopefully if we do our jobs right and the person who wrote this article did their job right, maybe we can help some folks out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get it. We don't have a massive audience, so the chances of that happening are not really high, but it's not at zero either. Okay, so
Okay, it's possible. It's possible.
It's possible. It's possible. Damn it! That's why we're doing it. So,
Okay.
did you want to start off with number one, or do you want me to start off?
I want to start.
Oh, listen to that.
I want to start because I'm very interested in this topic.
All right.
Because I'm confused by it.
Why are you confused by it?
Because I always understood that marijuana was not addictive. It's what everybody says all the time. Marijuana is not addictive. So I just don't understand why we would need advice on how to quit cannabis when my understanding was you could just stop doing it.
Think about people that are addicted to caffeine.
Yeah.
It's like, think about the times that they've tried to, not have that morning cup of coffee and got through a couple of days and ended up really fucking cranky to the point where, like, give me the coffee, knock it back like Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Mm-hmm.
I've been down that road,
Mm-hmm.
and it's again, when it comes to certain substances like caffeine or like marijuana, it's like the type of addiction that you get is not going to be the same type of physical addiction as you would, I believe, from like a cocaine addiction or a heroin addiction, because it's, not as intense as those particular types of addictions, if that makes sense. But you can get mentally addicted to something.
Well, that's true.
And, that I think that could, definitely be a part of it as well.
Yeah. So not a physical body addiction.
Well, I mean, we'll go through that with the bullet points here. Okay. So how about you dive into number one?
I'm going to dive into number one.
Number one.
Our brain is altered by THC and CBD, both of which produce precisely the experience people like. However, too frequent cannabis use has a cumulative effect on the number of our functional cannabinoid receptors. This results in a deficit of receptors in between times we are high. And this deficit explains the ongoing impact of too frequent use. Too frequent is different for different individuals, but may be as often as once a week for some people.
And to your point, I mean, I think this kind of shows that, the type of addiction that you get from weed is not going to be like a heroin addiction or anything like that. But that is not to discount the fact that you could be, because, yeah, some people that do smoke it once a week, for them in their situation, that can be too much. And, I think it is true that, the types of chemicals that come into your body via taking marijuana over time, the more you take it, the more you need to take to get that initial type of high that you had.
Right. What do you call that? Tolerance.
Yeah, you're building up your tolerance level. And I mean, that alone would be one reason to, on occasion, take a fasting break from weed.
Sure.
Just, I'm not going to do it for a month, and then a month from now, on like my birthday or something like that, just smoke my body weight in weed and see what happens.
Yeah, well, it seems like that's not the same as trying to quit weed.
Yeah, because again, it's not the type of addiction that you're not going to be so compelled to take it. Your body doesn't need it so much that you will go to any length to get it. To quote Bob Saget from Half Baked, you're not going to be sucking dick for weed.
Right, or like be getting caught in the chimney. Like, I will never forget when meth was the drug of newness, sort of like fentanyl is now, there was all kinds of news stories of just people being in very strange circumstances because of trying to get drugs or trying to get things to get drugs with while they were high on like meth. So the one story I remember is this guy getting stuck in a chimney that he was trying to go down in order to rob a house. And they had to come and take the chimney apart to get him out.
I mean,
That's a problem. That's a drug problem.
That is. And yeah, people are not going to be doing that for weed. But on the flip side, like I keep saying, you can't ignore the fact that, because of the fact that you can build up a tolerance quite fast with marijuana, that, sometimes it's just best to take a break from it for a while.
Well, how are we going to know when we're using cannabis too frequently, Ken?
Well, how about I dive into number 2 here and tell you how?
Okay, awesome.
All right. There are 5 signs you're using cannabis frequently enough to leave an ongoing deficit of receptors, and all are experienced as the opposite of being high. Anxiety and stress instead of calm and chill. Physical restlessness instead of physical relaxation. Boredom instead of fascination and awe. Decreased appetite instead of munchies. Insomnia instead of sleepiness. And I think, as you pointed out too, those symptoms can be solved by taking weed.
Yeah, you think about it, anxiety and stress, smoke some weed and you'll be calm and chill. Like I think what they're saying is that at some point marijuana loses its effectiveness. That consumption of marijuana doesn't give you the same high that it did when you first started using it. And so people use more and more and more trying to get more high. But there's a limited amount of high that you can get because of this limited number of cannabinoid receptors. So you have to not be using marijuana so much that you're out of receptors. Because if you are, then there's no way not to feel anxiety and stress, or restlessness, or boredom, or appetite, or insomnia. These are all, by the way, symptoms of both anxiety and depression. So, I'm not defending marijuana as people should smoke marijuana if they want to, or vape it, or eat it, or whatever they want to do.
I think what you're talking about, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm on the wrong path here, is that there are people that do use it for depression and anxiety, and it helps them, which is important to keep in mind. One of the very positive benefits of marijuana, and at this point, I think, especially with that point there, I think it is clear that more than likely this article is being targeted to people who strictly use it for recreational purposes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is important to remember that with any type of drug you take, even aspirin, the more you take, the more you need to take to get that initial, bit of comfort that you're taking that particular chemical for. All right. Anything else in number 2 there?
No, I don't think so.
All right. How about you dive into number 3?
All right. Search your experience honestly and note any of these 5 signs that we just talked about. Too frequently. Your brain's cannabinoid receptors can take up to 6 weeks to return to their normal number. It is premature to assume any anxiety or insomnia during the first few weeks of abstinence is necessarily a sign of underlying anxiety or sleep disorder. Insomnia, for example, is the longest lasting withdrawal symptom and can last a full 6 weeks. When an underlying anxiety or sleep disorder does in fact exist, symptoms will persist and need thorough medical evaluation to recommend their proper treatment. Okay, so they're basically saying if you're using, if you have these 5 signs, you ought to stop doing marijuana so that your cannabinoid receptors can return to their normal number.
Well, I think you can even pull it back a little bit further too, and that's just, take the first 4 words: search your experience honestly. If you are a person that uses marijuana strictly recreationally and you encounter those issues, be honest with yourself to, to say to yourself that maybe I am using it a little too much. Maybe I do need to cut back a little bit. To your point, for someone that does have anxiety, that, smoking a joint will definitely, calm. That's a different story, because people that do take it for medicinal reasons, they may smoke a joint, but they're still going to be using it more like someone would take medicine instead of it's 3 o'clock, better fire up type of deal.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the people I've known, like, just there isn't much to choose between medicine and recreation. If you think about it, like, yoga is recreational and incredibly good for you. There are lots of things that are both medicinal and recreational.
Yeah, fair enough. But if anything, though, it's be honest with yourself. When it comes to, taking a drug of any sort, whether it's one that you can buy in a store or one that we do not advise you to do in other ways, type of deal. Be honest with yourself, because there are too many stories out there of people that you care about, whether it be a celebrity or someone personally who had a drug overtake their life. And that sounds serious when we're talking about marijuana, but because I don't think, marijuana could really take over your life.
I think it could. I mean, I've known people who faced really negative consequences from smoking marijuana because of law enforcement involvement. Back before, I mean, kids today, like.
Oh yeah, there's there's a reason I didn't get into marijuana until after moving here and it becoming legal recreationally in 2015. I was way too paranoid to be able to get it. Now it's good knowing other people, going back to our episode on introverts, like if you happen to know other people, they may be more likely to be able to get that. But, that is a different experience that a lot of people in this country don't have to face anymore.
Right.
There are some, though, that do.
Sure.
Yeah.
But so, people can face really harsh consequences and still continue to use marijuana when they know that the consequences will be harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, just because you don't get the same type of physical dependence that you would get from heroin, doesn't mean that people aren't going to make poor choices to keep that high.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Shall I go on with the next one?
Yes, please.
In addition to reducing your cannabinoid receptors, too frequent use can also prime the brain's reward center to reflexively motivate you toward using cannabis when anxious or under stress. Counteracting this reflexive turning to cannabis requires developing interest in pleasures other than cannabis that you can turn to when the urge to use occurs. Get busy and get connected to other people during times of craving. Investing in interests that give a sense of purpose and meaning is especially useful. Sometimes people continue using simply because they have not developed the psychological tools and skills for self-soothing. Without psychological tools for dealing with stress and anxiety, we are more likely to resort to chemical tools. Cannabis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true.
It reminds me of that Bill Hicks bit where he talked about, when you're high on weed, you can do everything they say you can't do, when you're not high. You just don't want to. You realize it's all not worth it. And yeah, like any type of chemical that we use, whether it be for recreational or medicinal purposes, it can, it can affect the reward center of the brain. It's that hit of dopamine, really. It's like something when you are stressed, you're super anxious, you hit the bong and your brain's like, And that is not necessarily a bad thing, but you do have to keep in mind that, your brain is so used to you getting that pleasure bump that it's going to be hard to break from that if the day comes to where you think maybe I need to cut back.
Right.
So definitely something to keep in mind. And I think I think cigarette smokers can definitely understand this as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think stopping cigarettes is like, well, someone who was previously addicted to heroin told me that quitting cigarettes was the hardest thing she ever quit.
Ooh.
And I believe it because cigarettes are the devil.
I mean, my mother grew up smoking Cools.
Yeah.
100s.
Yeah, with them.
She was such a smoker too. Like, she was the type that would go through 2 lighters a day.
Oh, whoa.
That type of deal. She had this little silver case that she always put the Cools in, and she would undo the wrapper, slip the wrapper into the case, and she had her own little rituals for smoking. But until well after I left high school, she smoked, and I remember one time somebody at school said, "Hey man, you got," in high school, was like, "Hey man, you got a cigarette?" And I go, "No, I don't smoke." And they go, "You smell like cigarettes." And I'm like, "The what? What? No, I don't. Fuck you." But I did. It was my mom.
Yeah. Yeah, whoa.
Yeah.
So how many packs of cigarettes would she go through in a day?
I was being a little facetious about the 2 lighters, but she, at the time, I think she would go through pack and a half, 2 packs a day.
Okay.
But that was at a time to where you could reasonably go through 2 packs a day and, not have to worry about, do I have enough money to pay rent?
Right.
Because, it was
They used to be very cheap.
oh yeah. And I was probably the last generation that was able to do this. I was one of the kids that was given a note by their parent to go to the corner store, show them the note, and then walk back with a pack of cigarettes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's important, though, to get back to the, put a summation on this point, just understand, how brain chemistry works. You are, if people that smoke it recreationally or even medicinally have to understand that, your brain will give you a dopamine hit because you are anticipating what those feelings will be for your body once you do take that medicine. And if you want to cut back, you have to find other ways to be able to get that dopamine hit, and it could be hard. It could be hard.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about other replacement activities.
Indeed.
Yes.
Now, do you want to go on to number 5?
Yes, let's go on to number 5. If you plan to stop using cannabis, you are more likely to succeed if you make yourself accountable to a few trusted friends. Let them know when you quit and promise them you will check in twice a week to honestly report what has happened. Even better is if you can connect with someone who has already successfully quit cannabis. If you don't know anyone who has gone before you, check online for the nearest Marijuana Anonymous meeting. The people there have a lot of experience that can be useful.
If it's run by the same people that do Alcoholics Anonymous, I think the statistics have shown that people have just as much chance of successfully stopping alcohol by going cold turkey as they do by going to Alcoholics Anonymous.
I'm sure that's true.
And it's great that you can find the companionship and the support. And I think that's the very important thing about this particular bullet point right here. And that's having the support, more than anything. If you feel, even for something like cannabis or caffeine or whatever, if you feel something that you're taking too much of it, have people in your life, hopefully you already have them there in your life, that you can talk to about this and be like, "Hey, I'm trying to quit. Can you help me out by being my accountability buddy?"
Yeah, I mean, I think that online can be really great. Like Reddit, I'm sure there's a Reddit about quitting marijuana. And, the great thing about Reddit is that it's not moderated and you can post anonymously and there are topics about everything. It's pretty much like a old school bulletin board.
Yes, I don't frequent Reddit. The show does have a Reddit page, even though they're tumbleweeds in there, like most other stuff that we create. But it's good to have a presence at the very least. And I go on occasion, but Reddit has been more your thing than mine. So
I
I
just
will.
find I just learned so many things. It's like when I discovered YouTube that you could learn how to like plumb on YouTube. It's like discovering this wealth of information.
Yeah, I love going through like your YouTube stuff, and it's like EDM and like history documentaries, and you go to mine, it's like wrestling and movies and Star Wars. Like one of these things is not like the other.
Well, I mean, I think everybody's YouTube history is probably a little bit different.
Yeah.
They're like fingerprints.
We are close to wrapping things up here, so I will dive into number 6.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, number 6. You may have fewer withdrawal symptoms by cutting your use in half for 5 to 7 days, then cutting it in half again for another 5 to 7 days before totally abstaining. Great advice. I mean, it at the very least, you are acknowledging that, your body does, crave it, at a certain level. And, understanding that you want to decrease the usage, lowering the amount that you use until you get to a point to where you're using the amount that you want. And if that's 0, then that's 0. Very, very smart move. And it's also one of those things that people always say, and it seems too easy, but it's something that people don't necessarily take into it, put into action, for things like this. Now, having said that, yeah, is cannabis like cigarette withdrawal? No. But, kind of like with cigarettes, you do have to decrease. Most people, I'm sure, that do quit find it best by decreasing the amount, and then starting substituting other ways in order to be able to get like the nicotine cravings that they have until they're down to 0 cigarettes, and I guess that's kind of the same thing, the same premise here.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I think that's true for everything about you will withdraw less if you decrease by 50% over time, several times. So, right, if I'm smoking, say, 5 grams of marijuana a day, which would be ridiculous. So, let's say I'm smoking 1 gram of marijuana a day, and I want to cut down. The first week, I would smoke half a gram. The week after that, I would smoke a quarter of a gram. The week after that, I would smoke an eighth of a gram, and probably quit after that. But my experience trying to come off of other kinds of medication, not even marijuana or illicit drugs of any sort, but actual pharmaceutical prescribed drugs, and had terrible withdrawal symptoms and basically had to cut down really slowly over the course of like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember one, and I'm not going to bring up the name of the drug, but I do believe it was one your doctor prescribed that did not work well for you at all.
Right.
And yeah, you had to, to your point, in order to get it out of your system successfully, but in a way that would not make it to where, you were going to have any sort of, short-term physical issues or even long-term physical issues. I mean, I don't remember the name of the drug, so I don't want to speak as to what, blah, blah, blah. You get my point. But yeah, you have to do that slight decrease. I mean, going cold turkey, if you can do that, great. But
I mean, there's some things I think abstinence makes sense, like smoking. Like, I think, in all the time, I've tried to quit smoking a lot. I've been hypnotized. I have cut down. I have gone cold turkey. I have gone through like AA kinds of programs for cigarettes. I've read umpteen books on how to do it. And those were all interesting experiments.
All right. Anything else in number 6, or did you want to dive into number 7?
Let us dive into number 7. It's helpful to construct barriers to your use. Get rid of all cannabis in your home. Choose a time when you'll be busy or away on vacation. Set a quit date and tell your partner or close friend the date you intend to quit. I mean, these, I mentioned just now, I was talking about the cigarettes. Like these are all things that they say to do to quit anything.
But that's important to keep in mind. Some people do find themselves in a place to where, yeah, they do have to cut back on marijuana usage. And it's because it's still at a point in our nation's history to where it, for a lot of us, it's legal, at least to a certain level. It's important to I think ultimately remember this stuff and to your point, like, yeah, like it, similar to somebody that's trying to quit cigarettes that gets rid of all the lighters in their house, for instance.
Sure.
For someone that wants to cut back on their weed, it could be something as simple as not having your bong within arm's reach all the time.
Yeah.
It could be, putting it in a spot to where if you want to use it, you have to, it will be a chore to be able to get it out. Now, that's not going to stop people from doing it if they really, really want to. But, depending on
it just takes it off your mind, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, the point here, because as you said, this is, just common advice you would get, from the people when you are trying to cut back on any type of substance, really. It's just important to keep in mind. It's like we have this thing in our country to where people that do become addicted to something, whether it's a legal chemical or not, feel ashamed. And that shame really shouldn't be there. People should have the freedom to be able to ask for help and get the help that they need. And one way to not have that shame there is to talk. All right. Anything else on number 7?
Nope.
All right. How about I wrap things up with number 8?
Do it.
All right. Finally, there are some reports that a supplement called big sciencey name, NAC for short, is associated with success in quitting cannabis when given to people in a structured treatment program. I tell you this for what it is worth, which is still uncertain. What is certain is that tobacco cessation products, including Zyban, the product name for Wellbutrin, have not been shown to be useful in quitting cannabis. Important to remember, cannabis is not tobacco, different type of product, really. So using some of the, over-the-counter or some of the prescription methods that you would use for stopping cigarette smoking aren't necessarily going to help in this particular case. Something to keep in mind. And if you need that medical help, I'm sure if you have insurance, talk to your doctor, see what they can do if it's something that you feel you really do need help on. But when it comes to weed, marijuana, like, I think on the one hand, yeah, it's not as hard of a drug as heroin, as cocaine, as crystal meth or something like that. But you don't want to not think about some of the negative aspects that could happen as well. So if medical help is what it takes to get you stopping marijuana usage, if you really need to stop and you cannot do it through some of the other methods mentioned, not a bad idea, but this is also America.
Right.
So, if, a lot of times for stuff like this, insurance may not cover it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Treatment is sort of like dentistry or mental health is like seen as this separate, different thing than medicine. Now, because of Obamacare, mental health has to be covered, but dental doesn't, and addiction medicine isn't.
That's a different story for a different day, and it's definitely not going to be a problem that we can solve. But like I said, the whole purpose of bringing up this article is not to give a lecture about the evils of marijuana. I'm a marijuana user myself. Living in Portland, Oregon, I can say that without fear of being arrested. As someone who has dealt with anxiety long before I started actively using marijuana, and I can thank the Reverend Tracy for, me using marijuana as much as I have over the years. It's important to keep in mind that this, like any other substance out there, does have its negative benefits. And at the end of the day,
It's negative benefits.
Negative consequences.
Gotcha.
Sorry. At the end of the day, it's always important to be honest with yourself about, maybe I need to have that discussion with myself about either cutting back or not even using, even if it's for a short period of time. I mean, like we talked about too, if you are using it recreationally all the time, you will have to use more and more to get the type of high that you're accustomed to. So, fasting from weed for a short period is actually going to give you that good high again that you remember. Everybody that uses weed can remember that first time where it really hit. And a lot of times you're still chasing that, but you can get to that point by, cutting back. And, hopefully this article will help.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of resources out there. When I was researching this, I found a lot of resources. Now, unfortunately, most of them were related to treatment centers and were somewhat like advertising.
Yeah.
Those were the ones that came up first,
Like your Betty Ford type of clinics.
Yeah, and so they talk a lot about how treatment is necessary when,
They're
of
selling
course,
it.
they say that.
Yeah, the cynical side is like, yeah, they're selling you a product, and yeah, when it comes to something like the Betty Ford Clinic, it's great that they can help people, but it is really just a spa to where people can detox.
Yeah.
And I say that as someone who went to the same damn high school as one, Betty Ford.
Hey.
Yeah, she's an alumni from Central High in Grand Rapids.
Wow.
And she was Betty Bloomers.
Betty Boomers.
Bloomers.
Bloomers.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway.
Hey, this is Casey Shearer.
And this is Ray.
Do you like pop culture?
We're pretty sure you do.
Then come on over and check us out at deluxeedition.show.
You will not be sorry. Or maybe you will be. I don't know.
Professor Aubrey has a package in her hands that we have to say is quite delicious.
It is, Tim. It's Brazil from Coffee Bros. An amazing coffee with notes of cocoa and cherry candy.
Nice.
Delicious.
Indeed it was. Like you and I, we both drink coffee in very different ways. I need it, 9,000 degrees hot. And me, I make my coffee and then put in as many ice cubes as I can. I'm like the guy from Clerks, what am I supposed to drink this coffee hot? Type of guy. But you tried it your way, I tried it my way, and we both really enjoyed the flavor of this particular flavor of coffee.
Absolutely. It is a relatively new roastery in New York, New York. Those little town blues.
Yep.
Taking the Coffee Bros away.
Exactly.
Anyway, they're relatively new. They've been roasting since 2019.
Yes, but they do have great connections around the world in the coffee growing areas to be able to get the best beans, to be able to give their customers the best product. And you, our friends at home, if you go to coffeebros.com and you order your own batch of this coffee or any other of the delicious brands of coffee that they have on their website, in the promo code spot, you put FTN10, we're going to be able to save you 10%.
That's right. 10%. It's going to be like $1.50. It's going to be awesome.
But that's what friends are for.
That's what friends are for.
That's right.
$1.50 when you need it.
Exactly. I mean, you won't be able to get on the city bus, but you will be able to save some money to be able to get some wonderful coffee. Again, head to coffeebros.com and in the promo code box, put in FTN10 and you will be able to have some delicious coffee.
Yep.
Drink away, people. So we thank you all for joining us on this journey this week. Next week, we are going to be talking about an interesting article we found.
Yes.
Yes, on Psychology Today, talking about adult children of polyamorous parents.
That's right. It's going to be fascinating to find out what these adult children think about their polyamorous parents.
Yeah, and I definitely have some stories to say too, so we can dive into that then. But before we wrap things up here, I know you and I saw a great documentary that we wanted to take a few minutes to talk about on Max about Stax Records.
That's right. This was such a great watch. I really think everybody should watch it.
Yes, I mean, first of all, I should thank Paul Schaefer, John Belushi, and Dan Aykroyd for introducing me to Stax music. Why do I say that? Because the studio band for Stax Records, after that label went out of business, it was about 74, 75 when this little show you may have heard of called Saturday Night Live started. Paul Schaefer was the original band leader for them, and he's the one who got, essentially the Stax Records backing band to play that. And then when, John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, got the Blues Brothers together, man, like Soul Man. I didn't realize until a few years back that Soul Man was written by Isaac Hayes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd only been aware of Isaac Hayes' music from, like the Shaft movie, for instance. But come on, Soul Man, one of the best, songs ever written. If anything, what I really loved about it is that it showed just what great music was being made. I mean, they had a lot of great artists, like your Otis Redding, Isaac Hayes, the Bar-Kays. Unlike Motown, I don't, and we've talked about this too. Unlike Motown, like I don't know if Stax Records necessarily had as much of a connection to rock music as Motown did, because I don't recall too many rock bands that covered, songs from Stax Records. And, feel free to correct me, anybody at home, if you're listening to this, if I am wrong. I would love to, find out what that connection is, but that doesn't make the music bad by any means. It's just they don't necessarily have that connection to rock music.
Mm-hmm.
It was also at a different time too, to where like they talked about Otis Redding showing up at Monterey Pop and not really knowing what to expect. But the great thing about an event like Monterey Pop was the fact that you had so many artists from so many different genres just playing on stage and singing. And I think if anything, this music shows you just a side of Black culture that I'm glad, even though it was, three white guys that helped bring that to me, I'm glad that music is out there. And, if it's one of those things too, that if you watch it and you are in a position of power, me as a white guy, you do your best to spread the word to get other people to listen. Cause I checked out like an Isaac Hayes album on YouTube Music and saw it was a greatest hits. I didn't go through, like the other albums as well, but like the big hits, like Theme to Shaft had like over 1 million listens, 1 million plus listens. Some of his lesser known songs had like a few thousand.
Wow.
And it's just like Isaac Hayes should not be only remembered by the average person on the street by his involvement with South Park, which a lot of people probably forget now these days.
Yeah.
Because it's been so long since he's been on that show. Like he is, he along with all the other people that were involved with Stax Records are a very vital part of American music history, and it was started in Memphis, Tennessee.
That's right. I really enjoyed the historical backdrop of what was happening with Stax Records and how that really was reflected the times that we were in as a country. During the 60s, during the late 50s, 60s, early 70s, there was so much unrest. And it's not like there's not unrest today. Obviously, there is unrest. But it's not quite as obvious as the police shooting rubber bullets at people who are genuinely peacefully protesting, or putting water hoses, or sicking dogs on people, or shooting people and killing them. Like, there was a lot of bad shit that was going on in the 60s and the early 70s.
Yeah, and I mean, for anybody at home, it's like, but what about the, George Floyd protests? I mean, there were some of that there, but at least not to the extent of, fire hoses on people. But but you do have to acknowledge that there has been some positive change that led to that lessening over time. But, I think as we've discussed before too, when bad people that do bad things find out that the bad things that they do were no longer accepted, they will find different ways to do bad things.
Yeah, they'll just do different bad things.
Yeah. So, like that's important to keep in mind. And also, too, I think back to what was that documentary from Questlove, Summer of Soul, that came out during the pandemic? Like this is the Summer of Soul movie was, like Black Woodstock in a lot of ways. It was the Harlem Music Festival, happened the same year as Woodstock, too. But this was footage that only saw the light of day in 2020, 2021. That is an absolute crime. That was an intentional attempt at silencing, Black culture in this country. And look how much Black culture has influenced popular culture as a whole, and we've all benefited from it. I mean, as a rock and roll fan myself, if I didn't take into account the works of Black men and women over the years to get to the point to where we have rock and roll, like I would be an absolute fool. And I think it's important that, again, if you are in a person in a position of power, as it's been traditionally known, like being a white male, it's important to do your best to, pay it forward. And like I said, see this documentary. When you're done with the documentary, go to your streaming service of choice or go to a record store, buy some records, listen to some great music.
Yeah, records are so great. It really inspired me. Watching that really inspired me to get back into my record collection.
Yeah, like
listen to some records.
Yeah, we watched the last episode and you were like, it's 9:45 p.m. now. I need to put on a record. And then you went over and got all the soul records.
I found all my soul records.
Yep, you did.
I didn't have any Stax records. Like I said, my parents were into Motown, so.
Yeah, and because I knew you questioned that at first, but but like I said, with them probably with your parents being more country and rock fans, it's understandable that they would have that connection to Motown because of like the Beatles connection, covering a lot of their music in their early albums.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say to our friends at home before we wrap things up?
No, I just hope that they enjoy some good music.
Yes, definitely enjoy some good music. If you are a person that does partake in marijuana, fire it up in a way that you feel comfortable doing so, whether it be the edible version or the fire version. And if you have animals in your life, give them some love.
Yes, give all the animals love.
Yes, whether they be your personal animals that are directly under your care or animals like in your neighborhood too. Like we had a crow at work that was injured, that may have been old too, but it's like it was like on the ground outside at my job and was just sitting there. And at first I thought it was dead, but he started moving. It started moving. I shouldn't automatically say he because it could have been a she for all I know.
Sure.
And ended up hiding for a bit, and there was another crow in the trees kind of giving a warning honk. So I definitely kept my distance. There was nothing I could really do.
No.
Sadly. I did tell the people, my management and all that stuff, and they did what they could as well. But it was sad because I love, I've mentioned on the show before too, I love, leaving treats out for the crows to be able to watch them and my cats interact through the window.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing this crow just in such dire straits too. And I did notice, like, during my lunch hour, it actually walked towards me. At least in my direction, not towards me directly, but it just coming in my direction, and I saw it had like some white under its feathers, so it's possible this could have been an older crow as well.
Yeah,
but like, yeah, if you have care for the animals in your life.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
All right, so for the most electrifying professor in podcasting today, each Monday we'll have something in this podcasting space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
So long.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
on YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Goodbye, darling.